they were really considering whether the time had come to really try and undermine the Islamic Republic, the regime there, but was persuaded not to, even if it had uh, unclear whether it would have done it anyway, but it was clearly told by America that now was not the time for that.
Now, for our top story today, Iran has said that it is entitled and obliged to defend itself after Israel struck military targets overnight in an attack that the Israeli Defense Forces has called precise and targeted. Here's IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari issuing a warning to Iran this morning.
If the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, we will be obligated to respond. Our message is clear. All those who threaten the state of Israel and seek to drag the region into wider escalation will pay a heavy price.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer, President Joe Biden, and leaders around the world are urging for calm. Well, joining us now is Times Foreign Affairs correspondent Richard Spencer. Richard, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Richard, what we've heard is that these attacks spared Iran's infrastructure, their power plants. What can we tell about the choice of targets? And also, is it confirmed that Israel contacted Iran before the strikes took place?
That's not confirmed. There does seem to be some element of warning. It wouldn't have been direct. It would have been probably through America and from America to intermediaries. America doesn't talk to Iran directly, but it has a lot of intermediaries who they use in back channels. Sometimes through the Iranian mission in New York at the United Nations, sometimes through other countries in the Middle East. I actually sort of outlined a couple of weeks ago the three possible responses to that Israel might make to that Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel 3 weeks ago. I outlined one, which was the sort of, the nuclear option, literally the nuclear option, in that Israel might target Iran's nuclear sites. The second tier attack would be to attack oil installations and power installations, but particularly oil installations. It's oil exports that really keep the Iranian economy going. And the third and lowest level was just to attack military targets, air bases, missile silos, and so on. It does seem that Israel has taken the third option, the lowest option, the option least likely to lead to escalation into a wider war. We don't know exactly what will happen next, but that does seem to be the case.
So what do we think is going on here, Richard? Is this a sort of a very calculated response, calculated in a way that we don't escalate to a point where there's full-scale war? It feels like both Iran and Israel feel obliged to respond to each other's actions, but they also, it feels like, are trying not to get to that point of full scale. It's almost sort of choreographed of they both know exactly which lines they can step up to but not go beyond. Is that the impression you're getting?
Absolutely. It's not merely choreographed. It's not merely calculated. It's, in my view, obviously, I don't have access to the back channels I mentioned earlier between America and Iran and America and Israel. But it's not only calculated, it's negotiated. And it's not only negotiated with regards to what actually happens on the ground, particularly in this conflict that's so driven by popular opinion, by the narrative, to use the modern jargon. It's negotiated as to the propaganda, as to the public relations message. So we've had a massive build-up about how Israel was going to, all the various options that Israel might do. Lots of messaging about the talks between Netanyahu and Biden, with Biden saying, come on, don't escalate, don't go after the nuclear sites. We don't want a wider war. Those messages clearly being passed on to Iran in various ways and getting a response in kind about what it might and might not do in response. Yes, heavily calculated. Israel actually on this occasion was considering a what it would regard as a killer blow against Iran, something equivalent to what it did against Hezbollah in Lebanon, where it sort of unexpectedly and very dramatically sort of took out the entire senior leadership of Hezbollah in two strikes, one for the military leadership, one for the political leadership. They were really considering whether the time had come to really try and undermine the Islamic Republic, the regime there, but was persuaded not to, even if it had unclear whether it would have done it anyway. But it was clearly told by America that now was not the time for that.
And Richard, do we know what the next step will be? Is this it? We had the Iran attack, we've had the retaliation, we've had condemnation from everybody. Is this going to be it? Or is this going to continue between Israel and Iran? And certainly going to continue until, well, for the next 10 days, until we know who is going to be in the White House, because that is going to play a big part on what happens next in the Middle East, isn't it?
Absolutely, I think one reason one element of this choreography that you mentioned, which is a very apposite image, is one element. One of the dancers, if you like, in the dance is the American presidency, and as you say, we don't know what that's going to look like in 2 weeks' time. So Biden will still be there, but we don't know what the handover is going to look like, who the next president is going to be. Very important element in terms of what comes next. If you judge by the messaging, if you put that messaging in the context of similar previous rounds of the conflict, you'll say that there will be an Iranian response. Iran has indicated it will reply, as you just said in your news summary. But the expectation would be at a much lower level. So you won't get another 200 ballistic missiles being fired at Israel. You might get a few clearly signaled in advance shorter range missiles, drones that Israel's air defenses can easily take out. So Iran has always said, we will reply to whatever Israel does. So it feels honor bound to do so. But my expectation is, if I'm right, I mean, who knows? None of us might be right. There's always more going on behind the scenes than we can see. If we are right in our assessment, there will be some response, but it will be deliberately calculated to be the last bit of the jigsaw, if you like, the last strike that Israel can just say, oh well, that's nothing, and we can just ignore it.
Richard, as ever, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you giving us this time.
That's a pleasure.
Richard Spencer there, the Times Foreign Affairs correspondent, on the latest on the strikes between Israel and Iran.